Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to Bava Daf Tzadi Aleph. We're going to begin on the bottom of Tzadi Mid Beis, about 6 lines from the bottom by the 2 dots Tanur Rabbanim. Shor Tam. So we have an ox in which is a tam, in which for damages it pays as Chatzi Nezek. But what happened is Shehemus. It kills a person, and afterwards Vihizik. And then afterwards it damages someone. So it did 2 things. So done nos adin nefashis, vein done nos adin mominus. Since we look at the first situation, that it killed a person, so we view it based on dini nefashis and not dini mominus. Says Rashi, the tam in mishalom elam agufo, barahu niskol. So because we know, since an animal that kills will be killed, so therefore the body of the animal is worthless, and therefore because of that we're not done dini mominus. Because dini, when it comes to dini mominus, again, not only does he pay chatzi nezek, but you also pay only megufo. You don't pay min haliyah. So therefore, because of that, which we've established in the beginning of this masechta, since this is a shore which will be niskol, so therefore because of that you're not done dini mominus at all. Mu'id, on the other hand, Shehemus, Vihizik, that did the same thing. It killed, but also damaged. Done noise dini mominus. The chayzim done noise dini nefashos. So we begin with dini mominus. So you have to pay nezek shalim in haliyah, and also we're going to be done after dini nefashos, and therefore, as Rashi says, misham in haliyah. So kadmu v'danuhu dini nefashos. Let's say we first judge the case of the murder, which is not the way we were advised to, then we don't do so. Then we're asked the question, 1 second. So if you did din nefashos first, my havi lehedar v'dani nami mominus. Understand what exactly is this whole notion of going back and being done din mominus. So Amarava Ashkachinu Lurabanan Debe Rab, the Yasvi Kamri Hamani Rav Shimon Hatimoini. Who's Rav Shimon Hatimoini? Yomi, he says like this: Ma Egrov, which we had in yesterday's daf. There's a reason why we're bringing it down. The pasuk mentions about the fist that damages, and also a weapon. So Ma Egrov Miyuchad Shamasul Edel Edim. So according to Rav Shimon Hatimoini, he says it's something that's given over to the witnesses. In other words, it has to be that the witnesses saw the actual, not just the murder, this violent act, but also the weapon that was used, which we said is prat shiatz sumetachas yada edim. If let's say the weapon was lost. So this is what we say, that just like a fist miyuchad shemasal edel edim that's given over to the testimony and to the witnesses, as we continue to Sadi Aleph and Aleph. So he says that Alma, what do we see? Be'inan umdana, the beidina. You need to assess by Beis Din. Rashi says, Afun nizakin. Also, when it comes to damages, this is the din. So, continuing Rashi, V'hachinami tzarech umda imroi unegichaisu. If you saw these negichais, so you need an assessment. Abaha, kivan de gamardina lakatala. This person, this situation by the ox, where there's already Gemar Din that this animal is going to be killed, so we're not going to any longer do the assessment because we wish not to delay in the court case. So therefore, this is the reason. So if once you do din nefashos and there's a psak of misa, so then we immediately finish it. We don't delay. There's an inyan not to delay when it comes to a Gemar Din. We carry it out immediately. So therefore, that's the reason why if you do din in the fashis, we're not chayizer, we do din in mamnus. However, you have to do properly first din in mamnus, then din in the fashis, and therefore, for that reason, when it comes to a mu'id, because there was not a Gemar Din on the animal yet, so you would still have to pay min haliyah for the momnus. Mashenkin, when it comes to a tam, we said that when it comes to a tam, we first done din nefashis and not din momnus. Ve'aminu ha'ana. Afilu teim Rabbi Akiva. And even it could be according to the sheet of Rabbi Akiva, who Rabbi Akiva said that when it comes to an egg reif, not that it needs to be brought to the courts, but it just needs to be seen by the witnesses. So it at least has to be at some point the witnesses actually saw the murder, not that you actually have to bring the weapon into the court case. If you'll tame Rabbi Akiva, here, if let's say the owner of the ox ran away, says Rashi, Barach Balav, Vein Chavin Lo Adam Shul B'fanav. And since this whole punishment cannot be done Shul B'fanav, so therefore he's not around. Therefore you can't exact the punishment of Dini Mamnas. So in Barach, so one second, the owner ran away, Kilo Danuhu Din Nefashos. Even if you didn't judge the Din Nefashos, Hechi Daininan Le, Dini Mamnas Bloi Balam. It doesn't make any sense. You need the Balam. No, the Kabul Sahadi, they were Makabul witnesses, Barach, and then he ran away. It says Rashi, Hilkach, Ein Lon Mamal Shalim, doesn't have what to pay, he has no money. Sovsos Mehecha Mishtalim, says Rashi, Kila Duhu Din Nefashos, if you didn't or not done Din Nefashos, Mehecha Mishtalim Hoyel Barach. How are you going to collect? He ran away. So we're talking about Meridia, from plowing. This is what Rashi says. Umeshani Meridia. Mashin es hashor lacharisha. We delay and have the ox engage in plowing with schiris. We rent it out. Umeshalm lenizik. And that money for the rental goes to the nizik. V'achari kain. I'm not sure who's going to want to rent this animal. V'achari kain yaduhu din nefashos. And then afterwards we'll judge the animal and it'll be killed. Avokadmu v'danu l'sakel loimaninan l'dinim l'shavi l'ridia. We're not going to do it the other way around. In other words, if the guy doesn't have any money, we're not going to be done in the fashus. The animal is going to be an animal that will be killed. Oh, but before we kill it, let's have it work. Let's have it in a rent-a-center and have it being used. No, we're not going to do that. The din is that at that point we immediately carry out that which we decided. So instead, what we'll do is we'll have it used so that there'll be some monetary gain, that the nizik will be able to be compensated for the loss of the damages that were incurred by this ox. And then afterwards, we will be done din nefashos. Ihochi tam nidani dini momnus bereisha mishtalim meridia v'hader nidani din nefashos. Understand why the opposite by a tam. There's still monies there's damages, so why don't we do the same thing by a tam? So Omar Rav Mori Beredu Rav Kahana Zoisamaris Ridya Aliyah Demarahu. When we're talking about plowing, its connection is aliyah. It's above and beyond the value of the animal. Then Rashi says Ve'ein Begufa Shel Shor El Kashar Nechsi Balav Betamina Mashalom and aliyah. So like the rent for the plowing is connected to aliyah, above and beyond the value of the ox. And therefore, this notion of being able to collect in this fashion can only be done with a mu'id, but not with a tam. And therefore, for a tam, we just say we're just going to be done dini nefashos, they'll be killed. But there's not going to be any dini momnus involved, even though it did do damage. But because a tam only collects, you can only collect from the goof of the animal, so we're not going to have it do the plowing. The plowing is considered min haliyah, and therefore that money won't go to the nizik anyway. And therefore, because of that, there's no point. This guy has no money, and therefore we'll just be done din and fashas. Iboilhu. So now the Gemara poses the following question: Yesh oimed l'nezakin o ein oimed l'nezakin. Is there an assessment for damages or not? Now, what exactly is being asked over here? So, mi amrinan l'katalahu diamdinan. Maybe the whole notion, as we said, of evaluation and assessment has to do with when there was an actual death. Diamrinan b'hachi nafka neshama, because this is the way a person can be killed, with a strong fist, with a strong weapon, without a weapon. It's not possible. That b'hachi lo nafka neshama. So when we're dealing with din nefashos, there's a higher level of scrutiny, and therefore we require an assessment of nizak. When it comes to just damages, kol dehu, we can say there's no need to do this whole assessment, because even the smallest amount, says Rashi. Again, because the pasuk, when it says this, Rashi quotes be'evan yad asher yomaspahi kahu. So that's where the pasuk is talking about over there, about death. Avol nazikin, when it comes to damages, even if it's not really fit, the thing that we see, this weapon, is really not capable of doing damages. Chayev de zimnin the itzich b'choldehu. It's possible you could damage someone even with the smallest, even a tiny little thing. It's possible to cause damage. Odilma loshna. So that's the question. The dinim of evaluating, assessing the weapon which was used for a murder, is that this, do we also require that when it comes to damages? So Tashma. Mabor, when it comes to the notion of a pit, and a typical pit, Rashi reminds us, is 10 tefachim deep. Sheish bo kadei l'hamas, which is a sar tefachim. Av kol sheish bo kadei l'hamas a sar tefachim. It has to be that the pit is 10 tefachim deep. Otherwise, it's not kadei l'hamas, which is mashma. Hayu pchusin mi'asar tefachim. Let's say the pit is less than 10. V'nafal seicha shor chamor mace potter. In that situation, you're going to be potter, because it's, even though it did die, but we evaluate, well, probably because there was something wrong with this ox. This ox was already sick, and therefore this is not the reason why it died, because no normal ox, no healthy ox would have died falling into such a small pit. However, huzik bo chayiv, even though it's less than 10 tefachim, it's shaykh that it could do damage, and you're chayiv no matter what. So my love, mimata lamala kachashiv, we're going from down up. Even a tiny small pit, not even a pit, a little hole, which is a few inches deep. A tefach misaleka nizakin ika. Alma nizakin koldahu shemamina einam dil nizakin. It's clear that even a 1 tefach little hole is possible to cause damages. And therefore, even though you can say, well, come on, that's impossible, we're not going to be doing the assessment. We just said, okay, you're chayiv for the nizikin. Whoa, it's mimal mata, from up to down. Asara misaika pachas masara porta. That's the key word. Nizakin isa misaleka. Maybe we do evaluate, but we're talking about that for damages, it's got to be that the pit is not 1 tefach, because that's nothing. What's that going to do? But if it's a pit which is just a little under 10, so we have to start figuring out. Maybe we do have to assess how deep is this pit. Was it 9 tefachim? Was it only 2 tefachim? And then by doing that, we can assess, is this real that this damage was caused because of this pit? And when it comes to all matters, we actually have to see, is it shaykh for it to be able to have done that damage? So again, we didn't answer the question. So Tashma, coming here, another piece. It says, he kaho al einai, you hit him by the eye, with simai, and it caused him to become blind. Al ozna, you hit by the ear, v'chershai, and he became deaf. Evan yoitz behen l'cheres. So, because you actually hit, not opposite, but you actually physically hit that part, you hit the eye, you hit the ear directly, so therefore that Evan Kanani will go free. Kanegedenu ve'enu roya, keneged ozna ve'enu shameya. It's an interesting language. Enu roya, should just say v'simoy, okay? But you hit like near the eye, over here, or by the ear, or you hit him over here, right? And all of a sudden he can't hear, he can't see. And Evan yotzim behen l'cheres. He's not going to go free for that reason. So my time, so over here this is damages, and we say this is not a normal circumstance where someone would get hit at that part of the body, and then would infect a different part of the body, unless there was already something defective of that eye. There was always something wrong with that person's hearing to begin with, and that's the reason why this happened. So therefore, Maybe that's the reason why it doesn't go free. It's because we do evaluate damages. Well, Mishum Damrinan, who the Evas Nafshe, we say it's because he brought it upon himself. He caused himself to be scared, and therefore that's what caused it. It wasn't my entire violent act that caused him to become hearing impaired or not or visually impaired. No, it was him also. So if a person scares someone, you're potter b'diyadam. If you grabbed hold of his ear and you deafened him, you're potter. Also, however, if you grabbed hold of him first, and if all you did was blow into his ear, it was because of his fear. But if you physically grabbed hold of him, so therefore he has a legitimate reason to be afraid, not that it was himself, but you brought that fear upon him. Rashi says, Masa didehu, therefore you're going to be chayiv. So it's a very interesting idea. The Gemara is saying that there is an element of physical abuse, but there's also the possibility under certain circumstances where you can allow that abuse to become even worse based on your own self-ability to regulate. Tashma, there's 5 things that we assess, and we will give them immediately. Ripoi v'sheves, when it comes to ripoi and sheves, ad yisrapeh, it's only until that person is healed. Since we don't know this until he's healthy again, so we evaluate that whole time. So amduhu v'haya misnanne v'haylech enois lo elo kamoy amduhu. So let's say you find this person that you evaluated him, and then his status changes. So we say we go busser the umdana, the assessment. Amduhu v'hivri. Let's say he was like sicker. So, but in this case, it was the opposite. Let's say you evaluate him, he got healthy faster. Doesn't matter. We still give how much the original assessment was. But however we understand the reason behind this, we see clearly that we have to do an evaluation even when it comes to damages. Right? It says, Lamemad Gavra Kama Liktsar Mea Maka Kama Lo Miktsar Lo Kama Boilan. We certainly evaluate the damages, and we're certainly going to evaluate the losses. That's certainly not a question, right? There's no question. Miktsar says knife lamishkov. How long the person's going to be sick? Of course, you have to do those things. Need to be assessed. You have to know exactly how long and how significant. So that question doesn't seem to even stand. It seems obvious. The question is the weapon itself is the question. Is this weapon capable of doing damages? Certainly, we're going to assess the person to see how long he's sick, how all these different things, so you can know how much to pay. That's not a question. The question is, do we actually evaluate the weapon? Tashma Shimon Atibani Omer Ma'agraf Miyochin Shemas La'edel Edim Avkol Miyochin Shemas La'edel Edim Shema Mina Yesh Omer Lezakin Shema Mina. So again, according to our Shimon Hatimani, which we quoted before, he talks about the fist as well as any weapon. We say it has to be given over to the witnesses, and therefore we see from his statement that it's not exclusive to death, but even the situation of damages we will assess. Omer Mar Amduhu. So we have to understand what we said before. Now we do evaluate and assess damages as we saw before anyway, not just the weapon. But we said, let's say he did the evaluation, Vihivri, and somehow he got healthy faster. For some reason, nice little koma shamduhu. You still have to pay the bigger amount, what we assessed, even though that amount is more than really he may deserve. So why? So Masailu Rabba, the Amar Rabba, Haiman di Amduhu, Lokuli Yoima, person who is assessed, the Ispach Lapal Gadema, They were supposed to take a whole day, but Rashi says Isbach is this Rabbi who was healed half a day. He got healthy faster. For Ka'avid Avidta, and he went back to work. Yavin le de Kula Yomi. We still doing the whole day. Min Shemayahu de Rachmile, because we're not saying that our assessment was wrong. It's just that Hashem somehow miraculously led him to be healed. Therefore, we're still going to make you pay the original assessment and the fees that we calculated, even though somehow he was able to get healed faster. That's only Min Shemaya. Okay, that's the end of that piece. And then the Mishnah said, Rakak v'higia by haroik, the hever, etc. So there's din of boishas if you spit in the proximity of a person. So Amar Papa Loshon El Boy. That's if it lands on his body himself. Of a big dolo, if you spit on it, lands on his clothes, no. Avin Havi ki biish bidvarim. Why don't we say that's no worse than embarrassing someone with words? So Abin Merabin Mishmedu Rabbi Yosi Baravin Zois Emeris biish bidvarim patim klum. Someone who embarrasses someone with words, he's putter completely. Because otherwise, why would we make a distinction between spitting on him as opposed to his clothes? Spitting on someone's clothes certainly should be no worse than humiliating a person in public. So, of course, it's usher to do that, but you're not going to be chayav for boishas. So it's all totally on the individual. So is that statement lenient or strict? Is he being lenient? Because maybe the person who's embarrassed was an ani, a poor person. He's already been humbled his whole life, unfortunately. So therefore, the amount of baishas that you should have to pay him may be very, very little. Well, maybe we look at the rich person, that a busha would be very, very detrimental, and therefore it's you have to pay a lot more. Tashma, Medikay Rabbi Kiva, the fact that Rabbi Kiva said the statement that a feeling name should be Israel Rano so Kilu Hain Bnei Chaydin Shiadam Nexam Shehem Bnei Avram Mitzvah Yaakov. He said that everyone should have to pay the most, even if you're a poor person, because you still have the yichus of Avram Mitzvah Yaakov, must be Shemamina Tanakam Kul Kamer Shemamina. It has to be that the Tanakam are makel, because Rabbi Kiva says Rashi the Chazina the loy chayev lases leparei roish haisha el arba mea zuz. We find that you never have to pay more than 400 zuz. The Karmel Rabbi Kiva ani nami avin hachi, which he's saying that you have to pay even an ani 400. So therefore, if that's the case, that must be the top. And then according to Rabbi Kiva, you have to pay everyone, even an ani, because a poor person is still b'nei Avram Mitzvah Yaakov. So therefore, because of that, you have to pay the full amount, which is mashmal. And the Tanakhama said their statement, it's only to be lenient that there's sometimes you don't have to pay as much. So there was a story in which he revealed a woman's hair, and he said, give me some time to pay it, and they gave him some time. Do we actually give people time to pay off their debt? They have to do it right away, don't they? This is considered to be a form of damage, and therefore he should have had to pay immediately. When it comes to, let's say, a hit, which there is considered to be a form of a financial monetary loss, of boishas, an embarrassment, when it comes to boishas, we do give extra time. Shomer, so what did he do? So he was waiting. She was by her courtyard, and he ended up breaking some oil, and she put the oil on her head, and he said, oh, you see, with witnesses, she removes her hair covering anyway. Vosanyim, Amelo Rabbi Kiva, Salalta b'mayim adirhim. You're treading on mighty waters. V'halisa cheres biyadacha. And you have elevated earthenware in your hands. Says Rashi, you gotta to lift our atzmacha v'halisa biyadacha klum shehari charsis ein royal klum. This earthenware is worthless. What does that mean? He said a person is allowed to hurt themselves. You're not allowed to hurt yourself. However, you could sometimes embarrass yourself. Understand, this whole discussion is talking about the notion of busha, of the removing of the hair, as we continue the head covering, as we continue in Sadi Alpha Midbeis. It says you're not allowed to do so. You're not allowed to do boishas. You're not allowed to embarrass yourself. What do you mean you can embarrass yourself? This is what he was saying. There's no question about embarrassment. The other atzmo. A person could technically embarrass themselves. Even if we'd be talking about a hit, where you're not allowed to do yourself. If another person did it, you're chayiv. So again, the whole notion was, even though she wasn't supposed to do it, but that's on her. That's her problem. But it doesn't give you a right to do it. Is it true a person is now to afflict self-wounds? You would think that if a person would make a shvua to do something bad to themselves, and they don't do bad to yourself, that you're potter, and you say, I make a shvua, I'm going to hurt myself, and then you don't hurt yourself, so you made a shvua, that good or bad is something which is in your own control, if you will. I'll bring a person who makes a shvua to hurt yourself, and he doesn't hurt himself. So you see, you could hurt yourself, because if you don't, you're actually chai b'shvua. So Amar Shmuel be'eshe b'tainis is not talking about physically harming themselves. You're not allowed to physically harm yourself, but you are allowed to cause some anguish by saying, I wish to fast. So if a person said, I make a shul harab atzma, to make it difficult for myself by fasting, and you don't end up doing it, that's when you're going to be chayv. Well, same thing when it comes to others. So if we're comparing me to another person, so I can make myself fast, but am I allowed to place a fast on someone else? It's possible if I lock them up in a jail, so they won't be able to eat. What is considered doing bad to others? If you hit his head, you smash his brains out. So what are you talking about? It's not talking about a tinus. We're talking about physical harm. So therefore, if it's physical harm to others, it's physical harm to you. Some say you can, some say you can't. So who's the one who says you can't? The pasuk says, your bloods, which is usually that pasuk is used to talk about suicide. This pasuk says it's us to commit suicide. Rabbi Lezer Omer, I will seek your own those who take your own life. I will seek their blood. Maybe that's specifically, you're not allowed to physically kill yourself, but to harm yourself, maybe that's not an issue. Mikarin al hames, a person is allowed to rend their garments for a relative who died. However, this is do not do as the darchi amoyri, the way that they do. So Amar Belezer Shemati Shemikarei Meis Yaisimedai. If a person rips their garments more than they should, like Mishum Bal Tashchas. There's an issue about Tashchas. The Kosh Ken Gufo. Certainly if you do that to yourself. So there's a prohibition of Bal Tashchas of ripping your clothes. There's a din of Bal Tashchas, unbelievable, about your own body. There's an issue about tashkas, which is an unbelievable thing. Because most people say, "Oh, don't eat all that. You're throwing away all this food. That's bal tashkas." But you injuring yourself, making yourself sick, that is bal tashkas. Now, v'dilma gadim shani dipseida dolei hadarhu. Maybe the issue is not so much on harming your flesh, because that can regenerate. You can get healed. You rip a garment, it can never get fixed. Kihadu Rabbi Yochanan Kari Lomani Mechabdusa, that he called his clothing that which is honored. Rav Chisda Kad Havi Maski Beni Hizmi Vihigi, the famous story in Masechtas Tainus, that whenever he would come across these thorns and thistles, Madli Luhulamane, he would lift up his garments so as to expose his bare flesh and not his clothes. Omer Zem Malarucha v'Ze'enu Malarucha. This will grow well, this won't. In other words, my clothes, if I allow them to rip, I'm in trouble. But if I get some scratches on my skin, okay, it won't matter. So we see that apparently it's not such a problem. So again, but maybe that's only by begadim. The question is, why don't we actually let out from here beferish that we see it's allowed, because he allowed the hizmi v'higi to harm him. The question is why we don't went out directly from that story. Okay. And this is referring to a nazir. So he sinned. A nazir is a sinner. What do you mean a nazir is a sinner? A nazir, not only does he do all the mitzvos, but he even adds extra restrictions upon himself. Well, that's the problem. He held himself from wine. If all you do is hold yourself back from wine, you're a sinner. So this is questionable exactly what we derive from here, because it sounds possibly that we're talking more about fasting, right? That there's a chet to take upon yourself additional fasts. Okay. All right. Weiter. Also, person who chops down trees, you're not allowed to do it, but you're not going to be chayiv for doing it. You're not going to be, who are you going to pay? You're going to pay yourself. But if someone else destroys your trees, then they're chayiv. So Tani Rabba Barbar Chana Kameda Rav. So it was learned in front of Rav the following: Shayri haragta netiyaisai katsatsta. So my ox you killed, or my trees you chopped down. So I'm accusing you of these crimes. Ata martali lahargoi, ata martali lakaitasai. Yes, I did it, but you told me to. You told me to kill your ox. You told me to chop down your trees. So in that situation, potter. Interestingly enough, we say that this person is potter because you told me to do it. If that's the case, then you're not leaving any possible situation for a person to live. Kol kimine, is he believed with this claim? It doesn't make sense. How could this claim be acceptable? Because everyone's just going to say that claim. Oh, you told me to do it. What do you mean? What does that mean? Armalei ismei. So does that mean maybe we should delete this whole line from our Gemara? Armalei lo. No. That's not something to be deleted, but we have to understand this a little bit better. Titargem masnisoch b'shar ha'oimid l'hariga v'ilon ha'oimid l'katzitza. We're talking about an animal that was going to be killed anyway. It was supposed to be sentenced to death. Or we're talking about a tree which is going to be chopped down anyway. For example, it's an asherah, a tree of idol worship. Or any tree for that matter which is growing in the Rosh Hashanah, and people are afraid it may fall on someone and can cause damage. So that tree was going to be chopped down anyway. So Yahaki, my katainle, what exactly is this whole claim? What do you mean? It was supposed to be chopped down anyway. So we say, oh, how come you chopped down my tree? It's in the middle of the Rosh Hashanah. It was a dangerous tree. Your animal was going to be killed in Beis Din in an hour anyway. So what are you saying? I wanted to do the actual mitzvah of taking care of this myself. One who does the pouring of the blood should also have the right to do the kisei hadam. Umas be'echad sheshachat v'kadam chaver v'chisa v'chai v'Rabbi Gamliel litin lo asar zehuvim. He actually wasn't supposed to do that. He shouldn't have stepped up and done that because the other person wanted to do the mitzvah. So therefore, you would maybe think that he has a right to be able to just, again, normally to just kill this animal or to chop down the tree, but the person himself wanted to do it. But if he was told, no, but you instructed me to do it, only then would we say he's potter. But normally, of course, that's not a taina. Question. Okay, let's continue. Let's get to the Mishnah. Amar Rav Dikla Detayin Kaba. Rav says if you have a tree that produces kav of produce, asur l'miktzatse, you're not allowed to cut it down because that already is a substantial amount of produce that we don't want it to be chopped down. Meisvei kamihi bezayis v'yikatsur roiva. So how much should you leave an olive tree for that you shouldn't cut it down? Only roiva, which is a quarter of a kav, which obviously is much less than what was said above, that a dikla tain kaba. So the answer is shani zeisim de chashivi. It's a different tree. If we're talking about a dekel, so then it's a kav. However, talking about a zayis, then it's a roiva the kav. And here we are with question 6. Mahu shir hapero shiasa ilan vehi also kaitzis bal tashchas. So by a dekel it's a kav, and it says v'hu adin shar ilanais. Some of the Rambam, others say that. However, zeisim is the one exception, is quarter of a kav. So that's how you read up this Gemara. Okay. Amar Rav Chanina lo shochiv shivchas bari ella dekatz te'enasa. So Rav Chanina said that my son Shivchas, he unfortunately died because he chopped down a fig tree below zamana, before its time. So because he cut down a tree before its time, and he's judged kechutta saira, so he also died before his time. If it's a high quality wood, mutter, then we actually will make an exception, and we will allow the tree to be cut down. Tanya mehachi, rak eitz asher teda ze'ilan machol. If you have a tree that you know is a fruit-bearing tree, kilo eitz machalhu. So ze'ilan sarak. If you know it's not, that's like a barren tree. So v'chim yachash shesevul rabos kol davar. If it's coming to include everything, kilo eitz machal. Why does it say the language of kilo eitz machal? V'haktim sarak lo machal. To tell you that a barren tree comes before a tree that is edible, which means again, you should, if a tree is going to be cut down, you should be makdim the sarak, the barren tree. Says the Gemara in Sadi Bey's Amud Aleph, Yochel fil me'ulu b'damim tamlomer rak. Why does it say the word rak? It means you could cut down these fruit trees even over barren trees if the value of the wood is greater than its fruits. So normally we would say better you should always cut down the barren trees first, unless, as we said, that if the fruit-bearing trees, the value of the wood is greater than the fruits, then we'll allow you to cut down those as well. Shmuel Aisile Arise Tamre. So Shmuel had this sher karaper for dates. Ochel toim bahu tama dechamra. He ate them, and it had the taste of wine. Amalei mai hai said, what exactly is occurring? Amalei beni gufni kaime. It's because they're between grapevines, and because of that, these dates took upon itself the taste of wine. Omer, he said, oh, that sounds great, but mechachshe b'chamra, kuli hai. Obviously, the fact that the dates now taste like grapes or wine, it shows that it's probably weakening the wine. Tomorrow, bring me the roots, bring me the shoots. In other words, basically, you should chop down these trees, these date trees, if you will, because it's detrimental to my grapevines. Rav Chisda Chaza Tole Begufni. So he saw, again, between the grapevines, let's see, Rashi helps me out over here. Armulhu Larisi Akrinhu, rip it out. Gufne Kanidikli. Dekle lo kani gufni, because grapevines are kind of date palm trees. Date palm trees are not kind of gefanim. So basically, he saw like these trees growing among the grapevines. So he told them to rip out these saplings, if you will, because it'll end up being detrimental to his grapevines. Okay, we're gonna stop there. Let's see a couple questions. TA 19. Matai haroikik chai l'shalom boishis umatai pater. That's a pretty easy question. Thank goodness. TA 19. So the only time you're chayiv is boy. Hagia bo chayiv. Hagia bebigdo pater. Can only hope we'll get a question like that next week. TA 19. So let's see. Rakakmi kiba rut. So Amar Papa loshon el boy of a bevigdo lo. Okay. TA 20. Menamili de Amri inshi baser anya azlan yosa. Okay, that'll be tomorrow's daf. TB 20. Ha'im noisten zman l'chayvel kenil shalom chavlasol achar zman. So on this, the Gemara says only when it comes to boishas. Kan b'chavola, kan b'boishas. So when it comes to boishas, we do give time. Let's see what I wrote. B'derech klal lo, avo devarim kemo boishes, she'ein chisarn kis l'nizik noisen zman. Okay. All right, that's a pretty good way of answering it, to try to be a little bit loose. Okay, we'll see that in tomorrow's daf. So we got it coming up. Rabbi Gibber. So let's see. Let's find what we're up to here. Him noisen zman l'chavlois. Let's see. Hamakas avdo keneged enoi. Is that what I'm up to? Yeah. Keneged eno. The eno roya. Keneged ozna the eno shemea. And evidyos acheres amai. So there's two answers. So either since Nizakin needs to be evaluated and he won't normally be billed because of this. No, really doesn't need evaluation, only that he scared himself with his mazel since you didn't touch him. Question 4. Im noisen zman l'chavlos. If there is a loss of money, you don't give zman. But if only boshes, like our case, no monetary loss, you give zman. He motul adam l'chavo ba'atzmo ma'chlokes. Ha'imel l'chaveiro shorsh haragta. Matai yochel oimelo ata marta lo hargo b'lifdor. If it was standing to be killed or chopped down, and it's a mitzvah to take it away yourself. Okay. Lama mes shivchas b'noisha b'chanina. He chopped down a tree not in its proper time. Ayin the marsha. Okay. I wonder what that means. I wonder what the marsha says. I'll have to look that up. Eza piskam b'mar anshi neman machil mavim b'hem bikurim. We'll see that next off. Adkan.